let me make one thing very clear. In my very short talk, I would like to speak about the opportunities and the challenges that are brought by the transition, which is described in the Green Deal and the Farm to Fork strategy, and which are also underpinned by a number of initiatives that are going to be rolled out, but also by the Common Agricultural Policy. I will not focus that much on the issue of breeding, because I would like to actually hear about this more from all the impressive. I haven't checked the number 233 participants at the moment, who are, of course, have much more expertise than I do. Now, I promised to speak about opportunities from Farm to Fork and the Green Deal, but let me speak about problems first. The problems are, I think, quite known to all of you. European agriculture is responsible for about 10% of greenhouse gas emissions in Europe, and about 70% of that is coming from the livestock sector. There's another indicator which is about methane emissions, where of course agriculture is the main culprit, and livestock as well. But it's not just about climate. It is also about water pollution and many other issues that are quite well described in the Green Deal, and which we are all too familiar with. One thing that also I should mention as part of the issue is that the livestock sector is, or let's say, or the animal sector rather than the livestock sector, is responsible for it's occupying about 68% of agricultural area. And of course, it's not all too bad. In many areas, this plays a very positive role in terms of maintenance of grasslands. But I think that we can probably all agree that there is a very, very urgent and very dramatic need for a change. And I'm very grateful that this seminar, that this series of seminars is actually taking place to recognize these issues and to tackle them and recognize the opportunities and look for solutions. Now, in the Farm to Fork strategy, we have tried to do one thing, and that is to look at the entire food chain. I absolutely believe that we cannot look for solutions just in the agricultural production and not tackle what is happening in the processing part of the food chain, in the retailing part of the food chain, and what is happening on the consumer side. So all that has to be tackled at once, and one in conjunction with the other. So if I look at what we see as opportunities at the level of agricultural production, there's clearly a huge role for the Common Agricultural Policy, which is now being negotiated between the Parliament, the Council, and the European Commission. There is clearly an opportunity for further investment into sustainability. The budget of the Common Agricultural Policy is over 380 billion euros for 7 years, and it is really going to be up to member states in negotiations with the Commission to design the most appropriate measures to spend this money in a way that is going to support the transition. Now, these investments, of course, will be very different in different member states, because the point of the CAP strategic plans is that it has to address the actual needs in the respective member states. And in fact, just next week, the Commission is going to come forward with national recommendations for each single member state on how to address some of the aspects, how to address the specific objectives of the CAP, but also will invite member states to set national values to address the targets of the farm to fork strategy, and I'll get back to those in a second. Investments is one thing in sustainability, but there's also a huge scope for investments into let's say non agricultural production side of farming, and here I'm talking about the huge untapped potential of bioeconomy. We have very recently, well, the Commission has very recently adopted the methane strategy, and we clearly see a need to be a little bit more business oriented towards the production of biogas. Let me also underline that last night the European Council agreed on the new budget for the next programming period, and also on the recovery funds. And there, the two objectives which are assigned to the recovery funds are digital and green. There's clearly a huge scope for investing into renewable energies, for example, in farms. So I think that the agricultural sector can play a big role, and of course the livestock sector can play a big role in this as well. Staying still in the CAP, we will need to see how to promote appropriate advice to farmers on how to use the best technologies, how to be more sustainable, how to give support to those farmers who are willing to go on the path of sustainability. And the last point that I want to make on the CAP is the eco schemes. So this is an instrument which is part of the first pillar of direct payments. It's quite a sizable. It is going to have quite a sizable budget, depending on the result of the negotiations between the institutions. It is going to be somewhere between 38 billion euros and 58 billion euros, and this is an instrument which will reward farmers for being more for rolling out more sustainable practices. So I believe that all that we need to put into action. But it's not just it's not all about just about CAP. We're going to have a number of initiatives in the next year or two. One that I want to bring your attention to is, for example, the initiative on feed additives, which is scheduled for adoption in the last quarter of 2021. We are, of course, with the adopted budget, going to roll out the research program of Horizon Europe, where I think the topic that we are discussing here today, breeding, is a very, very important one. Last thing that I want to mention at the, let's say, the production side is also the need to have to be far more digital. We need much more data. We need to deploy more digital technologies, more precision agriculture in agriculture and in rural areas. And this is why Farm to Fork strategy has put forward a target of covering 100% of rural areas with fast broadband. If I'm not mistaken, at the moment, of course, the situation varies member state by member state, but we are somewhere around 60% of households in rural areas covered by broadband. So we still have quite a way to go, but I absolutely believe that this can be a massive game changer in rural areas. And to that end, we're going to also roll out the farm sustainability data network to support farmers in undertaking the transition in a very, very informed way. Now, I said in the beginning that it is not just about agricultural production. It is about everyone along the food chain, and we have seen over the past few weeks that there are a number of major agri-food companies who are pledging their commitments to spend billions of euros for transition, in order to support more sustainable production of agricultural products. And in that context, we're going to start what's something that is called the EU Code of Conduct for Responsible Business and Marketing, which is going to enable everyone between farm and fork to make these commitments in a measurable and controllable way. And of course, the objective is to see how this can contribute, well, to ensure that this contributes to achieving climate neutrality in Europe by 2050, and of course to reduce biodiversity loss. Last part of the food chain are, of course, consumers, and it is very clear to me that without consumers demanding a change and be willing to recognize the value of sustainability, this transition is simply not going to happen. We have put forward a number of targets in the Farm to Fork strategy in relation to the discussion that we're having today. We have made a political commitment to reduce the pollution from fertilizers by 20%. We have also put forward a commitment of increasing the area under organic farming to 25% from the current 8.5%. All that by 2030. In order to make that happen, but not just that, we are going to roll out a number of initiatives on labeling to essentially clarify to consumers what it is that they are buying. They are at the moment they absolutely certain about the fact that food is safe, and I think that thanks to the regulatory framework and thanks to everyone involved in the agri-food chain, this has been a huge successful European project. People take this for granted, that food is safe. And what we have to do now with the strategy set out in Farm to Fork and with clever business case oriented solutions, we have to make sure that that people start taking for granted that food is also sustainable. But there's obviously quite a way to go, and I'm quite happy that seminars like this one are taking place to actually recognize this need and look for solutions. So I'll leave it at that. I'll stay until the end of this workshop, and I'll be more than happy to discuss this with you and answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Lucas. Yes, we are running out of time, and we are a little bit late. So I still people are arriving. So I'm going to give the floor now to Nicolas Gengler, who kindly accepted our invitation only 2 days ago to replace Hannah. To co-host with Hannah, but finally Hannah was not available today because of personal issue. So Nicolas is a professor of the University of Liège in Jean Blou here in Belgium. He's also a former researcher of the FNRS. He's a scientific research fund of Belgium. So Nicolas has been active in theoretical and practical numerical genetics, genomics and modeling, especially for functional and novel traits. She will explain what is a functional trait for those are not involved in genetics. He's a professor. He's a very good professor. So he will explain the basics of animal breeding and breeding goals. And just a few last words, he research interest involve not only cattle, as most of the people knows, but also pigs, horses, and honeybees. So Nicola, I have to unmute you, but I don't know where you are. Yes, I found you. I'm sorry. And yes, you can, the floor is yours. Can you?
Okay, my sound is
Yes.
back,
Good.
but I also need the screen.
Yes, you can share the screen. You are.
Not yet.
Wait, yeah. So just yes.
Okay, so.
Yeah, we can see it very well.
Okay, thank you very much. And thank you, Anna. And hello, everybody. So I will speak today about quite basic stuff because, as I saw, 30%, if not more, of the people I know, at least all those who are not Frederica personally or nearly. So we have a lot of animal breeders around. So it's basic stuff, but we think it is important to do also some basics, especially if not everybody is animal breeder. I'm getting now things started. So objective of today is to speak about breeding goals, selection indexes, and also about how this breeding can talk green. Breeding can go basically and help towards objective of the Green Deal. Well, we have on one side animals, we have climate change. We all know what this means. This means basically that animals are creating emissions. That will be most likely the point we are really making today. But we have always animals also being subject to enduring what climate change gives us. So basically, for example, heat stress, what is a quite important topic given the summers we have today for the moment. You understand all what I'm speaking about. What is important as mitigation and adaptation are so phenomena that are happening, and we have animals that have to be put in a production systems that they are able to cope with it, but also to reduce their impact on climate change. To doing this, while we can do management choices. That's obviously what a lot of people are thinking about, but we have also breeding. And why is breeding important? That's the first take-home message here. It's because it's permanent and cumulative. That means basically we are creating better, more adapted, etc. animals. That basically is something, a choice we make. And these choices will, if we are keeping these breeding objectives permanent and so cumulative over time. But now, to be very clear about breeding goals. What are breeding goals? Well, I not say it here because it's quite a big topic, obviously, but I can only say that breeding goals are creating, leading to the development of what we call selection indices. And that's basically the big point I will make today. And I think it's important, even if 30% of the audience is perfectly aware of all this, maybe, or maybe more than 30%, but some people will be not. And it's very important in this context of understanding how breeding can contribute to making Europe more climate friendly. But anyway, if we have well thought selection indices, we will be able to allow us to achieve the breeding goals we were defining. And that's my question. What is a breeding goal? Well, a breeding goal is, in short, what we want to achieve by breeding. So that is obviously a very easy, understandable definition. In long, maybe it is a little bit more complicated. It's a function of the traits we want that we want to improve. But also we have to consider emphasis, weight given to each trait. So in fundamentally, we are speaking about creating a direction in which we want a population, our group of animals, to change, to improve. Important is here, and that is something I want to stress later on, is what we call breeding goal traits. So traits included in the breeding goal. On the other hand, if we are defining breeding goals, we have also to think that it's a quite complex issue without even considering climate friendliness. It involves economic, social, and here we obviously have environmental dimensions. So it's today often linked to the idea of sustainability, but behind are also social aspects and many other aspects. Even social is also part of sustainability, obviously, but there are many aspects affecting society. I will not speak about details here, but you understand what I mean. Also, it's dynamic. So we need to have regular updates. We have changing weights. We are changing economics. Economics is changing, so we have also to change weights. But not only, I come back to my societal changes. So basically, society has maybe another, approach to certain things. I give an example: boar taint, for example, and the fact that we have that we no longer want to castrate piglets is a good example, I think. Also, changing traits, and especially here in the direction of mitigation and obviously also adaptation, there are new traits appearing, and these traits have to be included in our breeding goals. Well, all this allows us to make breeding goals climate friendly. You see what I mean? Basically, our breeding goals can be changed, has to be changed over time to make them aware of climate problems, issues. But also, it says something about a crystal ball thing. We don't know what the future is. And as we have seen the last year, future can change quite quickly and dramatically, but breeding is obviously something with a long shot. We are waiting for we are basically doing things for the next generations of animals. And some species have quite long generation intervals. And I'm not speaking here about tree breeding, but even cattle, 4 years, 5 years is an usual generation interval. Obviously, we can with genomic selection increase speed, but still we have the fact that we are breeding for the future. Oops. Obviously, another point is what we call in scientific field this idea about need we a unique breeding goal, a big population going towards together, or do we need specific breeding goals? Well, advantage being specific is easy to understand because we adapt animals to specific circumstances. Organic farming is a very easy, understandable example. But there's a disadvantage being specific. Obviously, it slows down genetic progress. So coming back to climate smart breeding, climate friendly breeding, it obviously means that if we are going in this direction to have to achieve progress, we have to do it as a bigger group, as an international group, working together, etc., especially speaking now about breeds like Holsteins that have a high international, internationalization. Well, this, as I just explained, is an important point, also in our context, so we should not forget this. Now I was speaking about breeding goals, but we are really not selecting directly. We are trying to get a prediction of our breeding goal, of our breeding objective, if you like, and this is then what we call a selection index. An can obviously be more than one. It can be sub-indexes put together, etc. There's quite a lot of theory around it, and it's around a strategy that is currently used a lot by animal breeders. That's why I'm saying that animal breeders in the room may feel offended because I'm explaining very basic things they have learned in first year of animal breeding studies. So I apologize to everybody on this point, as everybody concerned, obviously. Now, important point is also that we, in the selection index, we are putting information together for many traits. So it's a concept of an information vector. While the traits obviously are weighted again, but this time we are weighting them based on something a little bit more complicated. I come to this back in a moment, towards a single combined index value. And now the difference is here that we have what we call selection index traits. So we have breeding goal traits, we have selection index traits, and it's an important small, say, nuance. Now, a small example, again, a very easy one. We have a breeding goal. Imagine that we were producing more milk, but having less CH4. When we look at this here, what do we see? Well, we have a population of animals and less emission. So you see less is in this direction, obviously means less production in the sense that these are absolute emissions. It's not emissions per intake and so on, or per produced production. So it's not intensity or something like that. It's really absolute emissions. So basically I've put in this population 3 animals. The question is now, how get we an better and good lower higher producer and lower emitter? If we are doing this by having some what we call independent culling levels, well, we may have B, which produces a lot, but is also at the same moment a big emitter because it's here. And you have A, it's the opposite. It emits less, but it's a very, say, reduced producer. Obviously, this type of approach doesn't work. And this shows us already that breeding for improved responsibility in the climate cannot be done independently for breeding for economic, social, and other issues. And then the best compromise is what we call our index. So basically, we can, based on our index, we have a line here with basically defining our level of the value of the index. And so basically, our selection index says that C is better than A is better than B. So we could keep C, and C is the best compromise, if you like. Anyway, so if you see, we come back to a point. How do we get this best compromise? Well, we don't need to get a good weighting of our traits in our index. How get we get the weighting? Obviously, we link it to the breeding objective. That looks quite easy, but it basically means that we are taking into account that how each trait can contribute to the breeding objective. And we also, and that's very important, we take into account the correlation amongst the index traits. So basically, the different traits used to create the index are looked together. We look together at them because obviously there may be double counting, there may be, and also that's very important here, negative correlations that have to be into account. See my example a moment ago. By doing this, we avoid undesired effects. The big issue about breeding is that you should breed having in mind that your animals are something like a guess for the future. So if you make now bad decisions, you will have trouble later. Well, obviously, the old question appears, we need adapted phenotypes. And to cite famous colleagues, but even in the age of climate smart breeding, we need phenotypes. Well, obviously, Mike has still the copyright, but I variated a little bit.
And Nicolas, can you please go ahead? We are.
Yeah, I will try to be as fast as possible. I apologize for that, but
no, it's our problem. Don't worry.
It was not easy to put a quite important topic together. Okay. Well, anyway, what is important is that we have high investments, and I will not speak about this because the colleagues after me will speak about this quite a lot. What is important is that we have also today many people speaking and trying to link breeding for climate smart objectives together with genomic selection. But still, we are in the trouble, we need phenotypes. So to get phenotypes, we have to go back to say a little bit of theory. Breeding goal traits can be different from selection index traits, okay? But that means also that we should try to figure out what this means. In practical, it can be quite useful. I take the example of direct methane, that's also mentioned by colleagues later. Direct emission measurements, few thousand records, that's what we would directly put in our objectives, that's nice. But often we need proxies, and for example, I may put forward here milk composition infrared-based, for example, proxies, where we have tens of millions of records, and even better, we have even records from the past. But anyway, I have not the time to explain this more in detail. What is important is there's a lot of work needed, and also the very high importance of international collaboration. I would even say, here I come back to Europe, I come back to people and say, people, we need to have here support for doing this, because a lot of countries have a little bit of support working here, but only the union of all these efforts, local efforts, and there I think European Union can really play a role, can help us to advance together. Anyway, last important thing, and then I have nearly finished, is that obviously selection index can also help us avoiding a risk. What is the risk? Well, risk is that we are selecting for climate-friendly traits, but our breeding goals are existing traits are negatively affected. Fortunately, first, some current index traits are positively linked to climate change, friendly breeding. Why is this the case? For example, health, fertility, productivity, as part of it, efficiency. I insist on this. All these are good. But we have first results. They show what? For example, we're selecting for more efficient cows, maybe also producing less methane, but we have less body condition, we have less fertility, as an example. So basically what you see, again, I come back to the principle of selection indexes. They are able to avoid undesired effects. So I have a general conclusion to be very fast. In this our age of climate-friendly breeding goals, we should consider selection index our ruling as emperor, in the sense that we cannot try to do the selection without considering the bigger picture, but we have tools to consider it correctly. Thank you very much, everybody, for listening to me, and I'm sorry for being a little bit long at the end, but I hope it was interesting for everybody, even for the breeders in the audience. Thank you.
Yeah, we can always learn something more, I guess. Thank you very much, Nicola. So now we had the presentation from Caroline Wethel from Geno, and Kirsty Winmer, also from Geno. They are working in this breeding company, cattle breeding company. And so Caroline is researching in the research and development department of Geno. She finished her PhD, while Kirsty is ongoing. Kirsty is working in selection for reduced methane emission in Norwegian red cattle. And so they are both involved in animal breeding and genetics evaluation. So just give the floor to the video that you registered. They are available later for questions during question and answer part. Thank you. The video.
Yeah, just give me a
Start.
second.
Yeah.
Set it
Don't
up.
worry, Miriam.
I don't think you can see the movie, can you?
Yes,
No,
perfectly.
You can see it? Okay, perfect.
We hope we can hear it too.
Thank you for the introduction. On behalf of Geno, we would like to thank you for the invitation to talk about such an important and interesting topic. And during this presentation, we will briefly talk about what we have achieved in our selection program so far in order to reduce the climate impact from the dairy sector. So we will talk about the breeding for a climate-friendly cow, past success and the future perspectives of the breeding program of Norwegian red dairy cattle. So the presenters today, I am Caroline Bakke-Wethel and work as a researcher in Geno. I will firstly explain what we have achieved in our breeding strategy so far with the indirect effect on the climate, and then my colleague Kirsti will introduce you to Geno's future ambitions and goals for selecting a more climate-friendly and sustainable dairy cow. Different potential ways to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions from ruminants have gained increased international focus lately, And there is a large quantity of studies investigating different ways to reduce the production of enteric methane from both dairy and beef cattle breeds. The greenhouse gas emissions in million ton CO2 equivalents are shown in the graph. And you can see that the different sectors in Norway have a different variation in their emissions. It is important to remember that even though emissions from the ruminants have a climate impact, it is still the emissions from the industrial sector, oil and gas sector, as well as the transport and the car traffic sector still have the largest emission rates, which can be seen in the graph as blue and black and green. And in 2016, they emitted around 45 million ton CO2 equivalents, while around 9 to 10% of the total emissions came from the agricultural sector. Out of the total greenhouse gas emissions from the Norwegian agricultural sector, the emissions from ruminants is about 50%. And looking at the greenhouse gas emissions from dairy cattle, you can see that approximately 50% of the relative greenhouse gas emissions is coming from the enteric methane production. And this is a potential to achieve an improvement in our sector, and that we can reduce the greenhouse gas emissions by breeding. And breeding is offering us a cumulative and permanent alternative to reduce the enteric methane from ruminants. We know that there are individual variations in the emission rates, but before we can start to select for reduction, we need to quantify the genetic variance and quantify how heritable this trait is, and we will come back to this later in this presentation. In general, we have a climate action plan, and we have concrete commitments for reducing the emissions from agriculture in Norway. Norway has an international commitment to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions with 40% by 2030 due to the Paris Agreement. In addition, the Norwegian government and the agricultural sector have committed to reduce the total greenhouse gas emissions with 5 million CO2 equivalents by 2030. And Geno has already started on different projects and to work with these issues. Geno has a climate ambition to be part of the solution to reduce total emissions from agriculture. We want to select for reduced greenhouse gas emissions in our Norwegian red dairy cows. In addition, we aim to perform a combined strategy for genetic improvement of the cow's feed efficiency, or how well the cow is utilizing feed resources and their ability to convert feed to milk or beef. We have ongoing projects that will investigate this further, and we will try to quantify the potential to reduce the enteric methane emissions from rumen. Geno is a farmer-owned breeding and AI company. We are responsible for the commercial breeding program of Norwegian red dairy cattle, which was established in 1935 as a breed. Norwegian red is also the most common breed in Norway. It is a dual-purpose breed and stands for the majority of the milk production in Norway. In addition to more than 90% of the cows recorded in our national dairy herd recording system is of the Norwegian red breed. And they have almost 70% of the total carcass production in Norway is also from Norwegian red. We have a well-established system for recording health and functional traits in Norway. And since 1975, each cow had their own health card where all veterinary treatments are recorded. This has enabled us to perform a selection program with a broad breeding goal, and we have had a major or large focus on functional traits since the 1970s. And this has enabled us to include a large variety of traits, and currently we are selecting on more than 40 traits which are weighted and included in our breeding program. I will just say a few words about the total merit index of Norwegian red and the different groups of traits that we have weighted in our breeding goal. Health and fertility is currently weighted with a large relative weight, with approximately 30%. We also weigh traits as calving ease and calf mortality and stillbirth. And we have relatively low stillborn rates in Norway, approximately 3% of the calves are being stillborn. So we are still weighting this trait to ensure that we keep this on an acceptable level and that we achieve genetic progress for calf vitality. Since Norwegian red is a dual-purpose breed, we have also included beef and carcass traits such as carcass weight, slaughter group, and fat class in the beef index, and this is measured on bulls, and it is currently weighted with approximately 10%, as can be seen marked by red in the figure on the right. So even though all of these traits, these are weighted and they have an economically important value for the farmer, but we think also that many of these traits, they have a positive effect on the climate, and we have therefore achieved indirect effect on the climate due to weighting of these traits. So GNO's contribution for reducing greenhouse gas emissions so far has been due to a genetic progress in health traits. We have reduced the frequency of clinical mastitis in addition to production-related diseases such as milk fever and ketosis. This means that we use less antibiotics and therefore the cows have fewer sick days. A healthy cow will produce more milk and therefore have a higher production efficiency. More productive days through lactation is beneficial when you look at the total emissions within each parity. We have selected for improved fertility, which also leads to more productive days, a shorter interval from calving to conception, and therefore we have reduced the number of empty days, which means we have a more productive cow with more days to dilute the emissions on. Also, improved fertility will increase the number of calves that are born each year. And another important aspect is that the calves are vital and they survive, and calf survival will also have an indirect climate impact. By selecting for improved weight gain or growth rate through the beef index, we have fewer days required for feeding, and the bulls, they gain the desired slaughter weight at an earlier stage. Fewer days means less total emissions per animals. For cows, there is an indirect achievement on the climate because their emissions can be divided on two products, both milk and beef. And then I will give the word to Kirsti, who will present more about GNO's future ambition for breeding a climate-friendly cow.
So as you've seen, we've already developed a very sustainable cow. However, we're not stopping at this. As the first sector in our country, the Norwegian agricultural sector has made a concrete commitment to the government regarding reduction of greenhouse gas emissions. Breeding is a very important tool in this context. This is because it gives permanent and cumulative effects. In Geno, we have several ongoing projects that will help us towards breeding for an even more climate-friendly cow. In several regions of the country, we've established what we call high-tech herds. These are both commercial herds and test facilities, and they are geared with high-tech equipment such as advanced automated milking systems with sensors that collect many types of high-precision phenotypes. Direct selection for methane reduction is a whole project of its own, while a new project regarding feed efficiency is also being established these days. The project I'm working on myself is called Selection for Reduced Methane Emission in Norwegian Red Cow. The aim here is to implement routine genetic evaluation of methane emission and publish breeding values for this trait. Through this project, we can update our breeding goal to include direct climate effects. But to do this, we need to examine the trait under Norwegian conditions, as well as to establish the heritability of the trait, as well as correlations to the other traits in the breeding goal. What makes our project quite unique is the amount of data we're collecting. The collection is done using green feed systems. A total of 17 green feeds are installed in both commercial herds and test facilities. They work by expelling feed, making the cow stand near the gas flow sensors, which you can see in the pictures, and the cow visits the green feed several times a day, and we can do continuous measurements on methane and CO2 emissions at individual levels. A big challenge in breeding for reduced methane emissions from cattle is the availability of data. But our project allows us to do continuous large-scale collection from many animals from several herds. This way, we lay the foundations for developing a robust model for estimating breeding values for climate traits. It's important to keep in mind that the enteric fermentation in rumen of the cow will never be a zero-emission system. Because of this, we need to look at sustainability in a bigger picture. Resource efficiency is important in this context. Breeding towards a more feed-efficient cow is therefore one of our major goals. Methane emissions from cattle is also correlated to feed efficiency. This is because methane constitutes an energy loss. Research has shown that more efficient animals emit less methane. Not the least, feed efficiency is a vital trait because it is the most important economical trait for the farmer. Feed constitutes 50 to 60% of the variable cost at the farm level. The correlations between methane and feed efficiency do, however, need to be examined more closely. Because of this need, Geno has recently established a feed efficiency project with the aim to select more resource-efficient cow. The project is one of the largest in the history of our organization. A system for continuous monitoring of feed intake will be set up. The aim is to phenotype 1,000 cows per year. All of these animals are also in herds with automated milking systems, giving additional valuable data collection. As already mentioned, feed efficiency is a vitally important trait for the farmer. However, it's also about resource efficiency in the bigger picture. Norway is a country with little arable land and large grass and pasture areas. Part of this project is also breeding towards a cow that may improve utilization of Norwegian feed resources. So to sum up, the modern day cattle is much more climate efficient than cattle that has not been bred for increased efficiency in production. Health and fertility combined with increased production has given fewer sick days. Put together with a high milk yield, this makes a more climate-friendly cow that produces more product at lower emission per product unit. But we still have high ambitions towards increasing the sustainability and decreasing the environmental footprint of our cattle. By breeding for reduced greenhouse gas emissions, combined with feed efficiency, we aim to contribute towards a future producing more food with a lower climate impact. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Without any more delay, we are going to give the floor to Johan Barendonk. And I don't think I think he's not needing of a presentation, but whatever, we are going to do it anyway. So Johan is the Chief Innovation and Technology at Hendrik Genetics. She was working before as professor in Wageningen University in animal breeding and genetics. And we are very proud that he was the former chairman of Faber TP until last year. So without any more delay, Johan, the floor is yours. I think you can talk and present. You should be able to do it.
Okay,
Yes.
and now I'm allowed to share a screen.
And thanks for joining.
Thank you for the introduction. I trust you see my screen.
Not already. It's going to arrive probably. Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much. And thank you, Nicholas, for giving an excellent introduction into the basics of animal breeding, which helps me to deliver my contribution. I was asked to talk about the contribution of poultry and pig breeding to realizing the climate ambition. And although I speak from my position at Hendrix, this is something that would apply globally to pig and poultry production. Poultry is a broad area, considers turkey production, broiler production, so that's meat production, and egg production. In my presentation, I will narrow down on egg production to also give you not only ambitions, but share some things that we have realized. So what I want to convey to you in the next 15 minutes, pig and poultry breeding will continue to contribute to improving sustainability of animal protein production. So I've also spent a bit of time on the past, because just to highlight that this is not something new, but I will also then talk about how we can accelerate to make an even bigger improvement. And obviously there we will take, and each breeding company will take its responsibilities, but it's clear that innovations to further accelerate the contribution of animal breeding are helped by tools for precision phenotyping, excellently introduced already, genomic prediction models to identify the superior animals, and transparent value chains with fair sharing of rewards. And I really appreciate the comments that Lucas Vizek made in his contribution about digitalization and following the value chain up to the consumer, because that's key in making that happen. If you look back, then in the last 40 years, the amount of feed that is needed for production of a kilogram of protein from pig and poultry has halved. So that's a substantial contribution. And we will continue to further improve, reduce the ecological footprint, and do more. Because although today we focus on being green, ecological footprint, we as animal breeders have the responsibility to meet all the challenges which there are. Sustainability, one word, many dimensions, and we need to improve on each of them. And the importance of each of them might actually also be different depending on the region, but let's not go into that detail. Nicholas has already explained how can we adapt our balanced breeding program to even better meet challenges. That's changing the breeding goal, adding traits, that's what happened over time. Phenotyping is king, so improve data collection, new tools, as also very nicely explained by the people from Geno. What to record, where to record, and how. And then eventually the genomic toolbox has we tend to refer to it, where we use genomics, data science, everything to actually take the best out of all that has been collected to identify the best animals to improve the breeding goal. So what is it? An example of what we do in swine, not to go into the details, but phenotyping is king. And a lot of traits are being recorded. The 3 dots at the bottom are there to reflect that. And then in breeding, as in poultry and swine, we use different lines. So here's an example of the 3 different boar lines that we produce. They all have they have a different look. So it's I think that everyone can already say that, hey, they are not the same. No, they are belonging to different genetic populations. And in each of them, without going into the detail, you see in the pie charts, we do pay different emphasis on different traits. The counter on the right, for example, is a line in which we pay more attention than in the others to improving meat quality. But unless we increase the size of the pie, that always goes at the expense of the emphasis we put on other traits. So improved phenotyping and also genomics actually allows us to increase the size of the pie, which is interesting. Then we can not only pay certain attention, but also make progress. If you look at laying hens, what we started in 2008 is actually breeding for 500 eggs, while at that time, commercial hens produce 380 eggs during their lifetime. In the first part of production, the birds produce at maximum, so there's no gain to be made there. So we emphasized on actually prolonging the lifetime of animals and the persistency of production, and to allow animals to produce 500 eggs in 100 weeks, but also not just eggs, good quality eggs, because improving the footprint, improving sustainability is not just about product, but also about good quality product. And particularly at the end, if we would not put attention to it, the quality of the eggs would go down. So the ambition is good quality eggs, 500, and that's what we started in 2008. And here you see some pictures of awards that we handed out to commercial farmers that actually produced 500 eggs on that farm. That's not one bird, that's an entire flock on average producing the 500 eggs. And we stopped giving out awards by now. Important to understand when we talk about poultry and swine breeding is the so-called breeding pyramid. Different from cattle breeding, the selection of animals in poultry and swine takes place in the so-called nucleus. That's where we have our pure lines. And from there we multiply, we produce grandparents, parents, and eventually the commercial animals. The commercial animals are typically a combination of 3 and 4 different lines to make the batch match for a certain country, but also to exploit heterosis, which we get if we combine 2 lines. If you look at the numbers, and that's actually the reason for putting it up, then one pure line female is responsible for nearly 1 million commercial laying hens. Turkeys, it's a bit less, but still more than 100,000 and 23,000 pigs. Which means that if we make a change to the better, in the pure line that's expressed in a lot of birds and a lot of product. The same is obviously true if you make a mistake. Then it's also transmitted to these numbers. But these multiplication factors also explain why we and other pig poultry breeding companies are investing a lot in collecting phenotypes at pure line level, because that's really only a small number of animals, but they have an impact on large number of animals. So that's, I think, good to understand. So if you then go to the future, and I already explained, we're measuring a lot of traits already, but if we want to have an even bigger contribution to reducing or realizing the climate action plans, then that requires in the breeding goal, but also on the collection of phenotypes, more emphasis on efficient use of feed resources. Because in poultry and pigs, the contribution of feed to the cost of production is even bigger than the 50% that was mentioned for cattle. So there's a lot to be gained there. The second is survival rates, because animals that die are a pain for the farmers, emotionally, also economically, and they also are a loss when it comes to efficient use of resources. And the same is true for quality of products. If a hen produces an egg that does not meet the minimum quality standards, that product is deleted. And we need to understand, and it's a big number, but in overall, 40% of what is produced gets lost. That is a general number that is true. So reducing losses at the farmer is important, but that also holds for reducing losses by consumers. Because in the Western world, most of the losses actually take place between supermarket and consumers. And we need to be serious about reducing the impact on climate, but we need to do it, as also expressed by Lucas, along the entire chain. And as breeders, we will also make our contribution to reducing the losses. And then robustness. Robustness to be able to handle different qualities of feed. Because in a circular economy, the high quality feeds are used for human nutrition directly. And pigs and poultry are there to use the leftovers and the waste. And obviously there's robustness is also needed to handle the fluctuations in environmental conditions. Okay, so if you then summarize this for what does it all entail for sustainable swine breeding, I'm not going to go through this picture in detail, but you see a lot of icons. Yes, there's a lot of things that do contribute to a more sustainable swine breeding. Some of it are related to economics, some of them related to social or welfare, and some of them to environmental. And we need to take them all into account when we want to make a better animal. Tools to accelerate. In pig and poultry, we have a very important tool available, which is recurrent testing, which allows us to test animals under different conditions and use that information to very effectively select. So that's there. But we do need support for precision phenotyping, measuring some of the traits that I've mentioned under the commercial production conditions, on individual animals, and improvement in genomic selection tools. And that's not something that breeding companies can do on their own. So more can be realized, but for that we need these three elements: national and international collaboration. And I've only shown two, well, because I'm proud of them. One is Breed for Food, the collaboration between Wageningen University and 4 large breeding organizations, active already for 10 years, and dare to continue. And obviously the EU funded projects, but there's many more, and that's important. The second thing we need is transparent value chains, in which improved sustainability is recognized. I agree with that, Lucas, but also rewarded to the producers and rewarded to the people that actually made these innovations possible. And we do need motivated people to put all these ideas into practice. And there's many people involved in a value chain, but I've depicted here scientists to come up with innovations, and the farmers, and the next generation of farmers that need to look after the animals and are a very important player in the value chains. So that brings me to what I already shared with you, my message. I think there's ample opportunities to improve to more sustainable animal protein production. Balanced breeding, taking all the different elements into account, is key. It's not just about being green. All the elements count. And I've briefly shared with you where I do see the biggest potential to further accelerate. And I've called for more collaboration and transparent value chains. Thank you very much.
Anna, you're on mute. Thank you very much, Johan, for your presentation.
Thank you.
Anna, you're on mute. Okay, let me try to.
Okay, now.
Okay, yeah. Okay.
I'm sorry, I couldn't unmute by myself. So thank you very much, Johan. Very instructive as often, as always. Presentation. You can stop share your screen even if the image is quite nice. We already see your screen. Well, the webinar should finish in 9 minutes. We have a lot of questions.
But before we go to question and
Yes.
answer session, I would like to share the results of the poll. So we've asked, how do you feel about breeding and climate? And these are the results. And now maybe we can continue with the Q&A session.
Yes, and you are going to have the same question to answer after the clear presentations from our speakers in terms of animal breeding and climate. So I have a number of questions and other ones are coming. So I have a number of questions for Lucas, of course, regarding greenhouse emissions from the livestock sector and the role of organic farming, delivering or not the climate ambition. So yeah, I will put them all together. I think it will be easier. There are questions about methane emissions from fermentation and the different life cycle than CO2 that I already know that you are aware. But there's some questions regarding this and how the European Commission is taking into account this difference to recalculate life cycle analysis or to use other methods to calculate it. This question of life cycle analysis could go also to Nicola after. And And yeah, that's the first one, perhaps, that could be interesting, the trade-offs of organic and less productive production, livestock production to Lucas. Please, Lucas. I think you can unmute by yourself. Yes.
Yeah, okay. I've done that now. I've retained that superpower. No, thanks for the questions, and also thank you very much for the very interesting presentations. I'll be very quick. Of course, when making the link between organic and GHG emissions, you're putting your finger on a relatively controversial topic. I think we have to bear in mind that the farm to fork strategy has more than one purpose. So it is not just about the climate change and the contribution to the reduction of GHG emissions, but it is also about protecting biodiversity. So clearly, organic farming has a huge role to play when it comes to reduction of pesticides, for example. But it also has, let's say, a more indirect role in what we were talking about of creating the value of sustainability. Organic farming is something that is recognized by consumers. It has its logo. Consumers understand that there is a positive story behind organic farming, and I think that already helps us to recognize the value of sustainability. On the other issue of calculation of emissions, those who are familiar with the impact assessment that the Commission produced on the minus 55% target earlier, well, in autumn this year, you saw that we have put forward a commitment of considering or exploring the possibilities of creating a new kind of sector of agriculture and land, and that is something that we'll be working on in the first half of what we're working on already this year, and we'll continue working on in the beginning of next year. Last thing I want to mention on that, and that's something that I did not talk about in my presentation, and that is the initiative on carbon farming. We're going to roll this out as in a pilot project next year, with the idea of having certification for the relevant practices in 2023. Clearly, this is not an easy exercise, but there's a huge interest for that from private companies. DG Klima is consulting various stakeholders. I believe many of you have been part of that. So let's continue that discussion.
Anna, you're muted.
Yes, yeah, but I cannot unmute myself anymore. I don't know why. I'm not hosting.
Giving away the superpower.
Thank you. So yes, so I'm going perhaps to change the speaker. There are some questions related to robustness. I guess, let me know. I think they were already answered in the chat by presenters in terms of water stress for Gino, and also the relevant goals related to robustness. So, and I have a very specific question for Nicola. I think we cannot group with other ones. Is that how your crystal ball? So how we will be able, with your crystal ball on climate, how can through IPPC climate models and scenarios planning, we're able to determine, this is for the best or the worst scenario, meaning it is a 1.5 degrees or 8 degrees warming. This is your crystal balls able to go through this.
Okay. I think it's more in the adaptation side, obviously, than in the mitigation of greenhouse gases. But anyway, the point is that we have indeed a certain uncertainty about many things. So we have to make guesstimates what is most likely to happen. And so for this specific topic, I'm not expert at all. But I can imagine that in heat stress, we have something like levels. So to a certain degree, an animal is not affected. And when it goes over a certain level, it is heavily affected. So we have maybe to check on our side or where we are and then see if this level is relevant. Unfortunately, it is quite relevant because, for example, in ruminants, this level is much less than we would expect. And so animals are quite quickly heat stressed. So anyway, so I think it's a complex question, and I'm not sure if I am really the competent person to reply to it. But at least animal breeding, we have some strategies to address this type of uncertainties based on some reflections. But anyway, it's a difficult question for me.
Okay.
Is it okay to add to that?
Yes.
Very good.
So I think here is also where collaboration between species can come in. As I explained in pigs and in particular in poultry, we already put some of our populations in Burkina Faso, for instance. So there we test under really continuously hot climates, the animals that we normally would keep in France. That's in one line. But if we, let's have a crystal ball. If we would be able to pinpoint the genes that are responsible for a good resistance to hot climate in that line we are testing, then it's certainly worthwhile to investigate whether the same gene can be used in other poultry species or even in pigs. I know that currently we're not close enough to that because our knowledge on the genome is improving every year. That's a nice statement, but it's not good enough right now to actually allow these transitions. But if we would make it, and I'm really pleased with the FANG initiatives, really laying the foundation to be able to do this, then we could really start making progress by exploiting the information we do collect under hot conditions, as one example, into not only that line, but in other species. And that's why I really applaud the investment that also the EU is making in projects like FANG, but there's also others, to really make that happen. I think that's been the dream since we had the first full genome sequence. But like with dreams, I'm sure that this one will come through, but it takes a little longer.
I may quickly add this is another point because it's a good point about biodiversity, because we have obviously some species, some breeds being for generations in difficult environments, also what climate side. So basically this is also something we should think about. For example, even in a big breed like Holsteins, we have the slick hair gene that is there and can be introgressed. So basically there's a lot of interesting stuff around, and when the idea about biodiversity appears, I think we should not forget that also in breeding in our species, we have a certain number of breeds, of different breeds in different environments, and these breeds and environments can harbor genes of interest. So it's really a nice topic, important.
Yep. And could I react to Lucas' point?
Yes.
So Lucas, I really appreciate that you talk about labeling. And I don't think that organic production is a difficult topic, but we need to understand that improved sustainability has different dimensions, and as long as we do not recognize that, then we end up in black and white discussions. Then organic is better than non-organic. Organic has got advantages in some, but let's accept that there's no free lunch. There is disadvantages. And let's be transparent on them. Let's communicate, not on one scale, but let's communicate to the public on the different scales that are there for sustainability. And then we can have a good discussion. But if labeling would reduce to organic, non-organic, then we are not making the steps that are possible. So it's important to have a good labeling, but the labeling should indeed stimulate the improvement on the different actions. And also here, diversity is important. So let's have different options, and organic is certainly one towards a more sustainable production. But do you think it's possible to go from the one certification to multiple dimensions in such a system?
Lucas, do you want to? Okay.
Sure. No, I agree with you. And this is basically the point where I have started, is that organic agriculture is the and apologies for being technical and bureaucratic about it, but it's the only sustainable agricultural system which is legally defined at the moment. So that's kind of the starting point, and this is exactly what we're trying to change with Farm to Fork and with the whole labeling approach. And this is why the Farm to Fork has put forward the whole sustainability framework for 2023, so that we do not do this, as you said quite well, this black and white approach, that something's good and something's not good, not necessarily bad, but it's a very, very complex process that we have to go through. We have 3 years to do that, and I'm quite positive that we're going to get there. But yes, it is something that we are. That's the direction of travel that Farm to Fork has.
I have I'm sorry. I have just one question more because we are out of time, and it's related what you are saying about sustainability. There is a question regarding this code of conduct for responsible business that you mentioned earlier. So what is the idea behind of the Commission towards the private business in regards of this clever business or responsible business?
Look, we're going to have, well, let me say two things on that. First of all, the Commission adopted the Climate Pact on Wednesday. You can already find some teasers and promotion videos on that on social media, and we're going to have a very big and a very interesting launch event next week. So I would like to invite you to tune into that one. I'm not sure whether I have. Oh, it looked like I have lost connection for a bit. So I would like to invite you to that one. And this is essentially an initiative where everyone, citizens, companies, governments can show how they want to contribute to the project of climate neutrality and stopping the biodiversity loss, which are at the forefront of the Green Deal. Now, more specifically on the EU Conduct for Responsible Business and Marketing Practices, this is going to be a process that we want to do kind of a bottom up with companies and with stakeholders. We're going to launch that in January. And the idea is that you've seen over the last few weeks, there are companies which are saying how they're going to reduce pesticides, how they're going to stop deforestation, how much money they're going to invest into regenerative agriculture, and it is really billions of euros. And we would like to make these commitments kind of measurable, comparable, but also making sure that they are not empty shells, and that is a bit behind the idea of the EU Conduct. So watch that space in January with the launch of that initiative.
Yes, thank you very much, Lucas. And the first meeting with the stakeholders is now running at this moment. One of our colleagues is attending. So the stakeholders, they are consulted indeed, and we will be happy to provide inputs. So I think it's time to stop here to introduce you the chairman of EFAF, Craig Lewis, who is attending also today. I will bring you some conclusions of this webinar. Craig? you have the floor, and I think it's Johan having the powers, the power to give you the floor. I don't know why I have missed them. I cannot do it. Nuru or Miriam, perhaps you can do it too, but I cannot.
Yeah, I asked Kijk to.
Yes, I
Yep.
think it's, yeah.
Got it. Well, fantastic to see some lots of faces, and thank you, everyone. As chair of the steering committee of FAB, I just want to first of all thank all the attendees. Also want to thank the speakers and thank the whole of the FAB team for organizing this. And first and foremost, I would like to say that, hey, I'm glad this is a series of webinars, because I think we've already just illustrated there's a little bit more than just a couple of hours talk regarding this subject, and it's a vitally important subject. I've made so many notes today. I'm just going to try and summarize a few of my thoughts. Just stepping back firstly, before looking at, shall we say, animal breeding specifically and looking at livestock agriculture. I mean, clearly, livestock agriculture is vitally important to Europe and the world. We can talk about supporting rural livelihoods, biodiversity, food safety in different places. And animal breeding is a key part of the livestock sector and a key part of meeting the challenges that are being laid down to us over the next period of time on a global and regional perspective. Frankly speaking, livestock agriculture does need to produce safe, nutritious, and fundamentally tasty food. So that way, in terms of animal breeding, we're going to contribute towards that by, increasing the welfare and sustainability. And part of that is production efficiently. We need to produce efficiently because that is going to lead to a lower carbon footprint per kilo of protein produced. And we need these tools to meet the challenges of climate change that are real today, but also about exceeding customer demands and the demands of the European citizens. I think breeding continues to contribute in many innovative ways. We need to look about the new tools in breeding, whether we talk about tools that are going to be discussed in future webinars like metabolomics or novel breeding technologies. These are all part of a combination of tools. I mean, we can talk about manure management strategies. We can talk about the reduction of food waste that I've seen in the comments today. These are all good. But things like gene editing, things like metabolomics, things like novel phenotyping or digital transformation and big data, these are all tools in a toolbox that allows animal breeding to do its part in meeting the challenges of the whole food chain. And I'm glad that was raised today by Lucas. In terms of some specific notes that I made on the talks today, I hear about the importance of technology, measuring the right things in breeding technology. I really appreciate Lucas bringing that up. And we've got to do things in the right way. I mean, at the end of the day, we're missing an opportunity if retail and consumers think that, hey, plant-based meat is more sustainable than livestock meat. That there's no black and white, as Johan said. There's lots of shade of gray, and we need to be part of the conversation that we can look at these at a more holistic level and understand how all of these pieces fit together. In terms of my colleagues in animal breeding, Nikolai setting the ground, or my colleagues and friends at Gino or Johan, illustrating what we're doing today. Selection on multiple traits, really already having, sustainability, climate change at the core of practical animal breeding here in Europe. This is a reality today. Frankly speaking, we do not do enough to communicate that message at all areas of the whole food chain or the legislative chain. Johan really touched upon the new tools that are being developed, and we need to continue to develop those. And how breeding is not just about breeding within certain specific lines, but how we can use multiple breeds, multiple lines to address particular markets, market segments, so that way we can utilize breeding across lines. Just to summarize now and finishing up, being respectful of everybody's time. Many people on this call work with farmers or do work which impacts farmers. We look farmers in the eye on a day in, day out basis. And my challenge to people on this call, people on the future calls from FAB, is really to make a difference. We need to connect science, production, legislation, and consumers. We need to do a better job of linking all of these aspects together, because only by utilization of the best science and then executing that in the industry with the assistance of legislators are we really going to tackle the challenges of the future generations. Because it's in all of our interests, it's all of our goal to really create the best possible world and the best possible industry for our children that we can pass along. So with that, I want to thank everybody once again. I wish you all a great weekend, and I really appreciate you looking out for the future webinars in this series. Many thanks.